Single Mothers of Reddit. What made you a single mother? Part 1. It's strange looking back now how many of our hardest days blurred together. I sometimes wonder how we survived those early years. Maybe we didn't. Maybe parts of us died and were reborn into something harder, more determined. I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. He was 21, working 3 part-time jobs to keep us fed. Driving his old rust-bitten truck that coughed like a dying animal, we were already barely scraping by living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop, the kind of place where you could hear every drunk argument and muffled scream through the walls. I had just started my nursing classes and dropped them. Immediately after the 2nd trimester hit, morning sickness doesn't wait for education. We were too young, too broke, and too stupid to have a baby, they said. Everyone said it, my mother, his brothers, our old high school teachers. You'll ruin your lives, they warned. You'll hate each other by the time the baby's 3. Maybe they were right. But we were already in love, real love, not movie love. The kind where you skip meals so he can eat before night shift. The kind where he walks for miles in the snow when the truck breaks down, just to get me prenatalivitamins.com. We named her Elara. She was born screaming and red-faced in a county hospital with flickering lights and nurses who didn't look you in the eye. I'll never forget the way he looked at her, like she was the sun and he was thawing for the first time in years. And I'll never forget how we slept that night. Me on the stiff cot with her on my chest. Him curled up on the cold tile floor in the corner, one hand on my ankle like I might float away if he didn't anchor me. The first 2 years were a blur of exhaustion. Diapers bought with loose change. Nights spent rocking her with no heat in the winter. I watched him crumble and rebuild himself every day. When the layoffs came and the lights went out, and I caught pneumonia that winter, I thought we'd lose everything. We almost did. But he found work, shady work, the kind you don't talk about. Cash under the table, driving late at night with strangers in the passenger seat. He never told me the details. I didn't ask. All I knew was the fridge had food and Elara had formula again. People asked why I stayed, why I didn't pack up and move in with my sister or apply for WIC, but they didn't see the man I saw. They didn't see him whisper prayers over her crib when he thought I was asleep. They didn't see how he'd hold her so gently, like she might disappear if he blinked. They didn't see the fire in his eyes when he promised me we'd make it, that we'd build a life no one could ever take from us. He started a small logistics gig, bought a secondhand laptop, taught himself how to write code from YouTube and Reddit. Every free second was spent building something I didn't fully understand. But I believed in him. I always did.
He stopped flinching at price tags. He wore watches that ticked with quiet confidence. He kept a gun in the nightstand, said it was just in case. We threw barbecues in the summer, sent our kids to private school, took vacations to places we couldn't pronounce 5 years earlier. I should have felt safe. I should have felt invincible. But some nights I'd wake up and find him standing in the hallway, staring at the front door like he was waiting for something. And he always looked over his shoulder, even when there was no reason to. That was the price of building our life the way we had. And I didn't know it then, but the bill was still coming. It was a Friday night when everything cracked. The twins had just turned 4, Elara was nearly 10, and Maceo had broken his arm at school trying to climb the monkey bars like Daddy taught him. We were finally settled into the rhythm of success dinners as a family, movie nights, morning chaos with 4 kids scrambling for cereal, and him in the middle of it all like gravity itself. I had started a home care service with my RN license, and he had just landed a government logistics contract. It felt untouchable until the past came knocking. It was subtle at first. A dark SUV parked across the street for hours at a time. The alarm system getting tripped in the middle of the night. A man at the grocery store who smiled too long and said my husband's name. Before walking off, I brought it up once, told him something felt wrong. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "I've got it handled." But his eyes were different. He hadn't been sleeping. And when he hugged the kids goodnight, he held them just a little longer. Then came the message. A plain white envelope slid under our door while we were sleeping. Inside, 3 photos. Him, me, the kids, in public places. Someone had been watching for months. There was also a burner phone. It rang once, a few hours later, and he answered it without hesitation. He left the room, but I heard the way his voice dropped. The silence afterward was louder than any scream. That night, he didn't sleep. I sat beside him on the edge of our bed, and he told me everything. Years ago, during our darkest days, he'd taken work from a group that didn't leave loose ends. Money moved across borders, names erased, favors owed. It had helped us survive then. It had paid for formula and heaters and kept eviction off our backs. But he hadn't realized how far the web reached, or how tight it could pull once you tried to leave it. He thought he'd done enough to disappear. He hadn't. I made a choice, he said. I dragged my hands through the mud so we could climb out. But mud sticks, babe. It always does. They wanted something, a final job, one last favor. A trade his freedom, maybe his life, for their silence. I begged him not to go. I told him we could run, change our names, disappear. He shook his head. You think they won't find us again? I won't let you and the kids spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulder. We fought. I screamed. I begged. He held my face in his hands and said, I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for you, for the life we built, for the chance that our kids can grow up without fear. Then he left. The next 48 hours were agony. He didn't answer his phone, didn't respond to messages. I sat at the kitchen table with the burner phone clutched in my hand like it was a time bomb. I tried to act normal for the kids made pancakes, read bedtime stories, but every time the wind moved the curtains, I thought it was the end. Then came the call, a number I didn't recognize, a voice I didn't know, a single sentence, it's done. He paid in full. I dropped the phone. He never came home. The authorities found his car near the docks, burned out and empty. The police said it could have been an accident, a robbery, a carjacking. They didn't know, but I knew. He didn't die because of a random act of violence. He died because years ago, he made a deal with the devil to feed his family. And when the devil came to collect, he handed himself over to SpareTheRestOfUs.com. Part 4. The thing about grief is that it's not just sadness, it's silence. A silence so heavy it wraps around your lungs like chains. I lived in that silence for days after the call. I moved like a ghost through the house, smiling for the kids, brushing hair, folding laundry. But inside, something had broken, not crack shattered. And then, the story changed. It started with a news report, a late night segment I almost didn't see. Explosion at old shipping yard, possible criminal ties. They showed grainy footage, smoke, twisted metal, men in tactical gear, dragging out bodies. No names, no confirmations, but I knew. The dock where they found his car, it was a front, a shell for something darker. An operation running under layers of paper and blood, connected to the same people who had threatened us. The explosion had taken out the warehouse and 3 men with ties to international laundering, missing persons, illegal transport, and buried in the story, almost like a footnote, was a whisper of a different kind of death. A man unidentified had driven a vehicle onto the site just minutes before detonation. No one could confirm if he was inside when it went up. The camera lingered for half a second on what was left of the vehicle frame. My breath left my body. He hadn't run. He hadn't surrendered. He ended it on his terms, and he took them with him. That was who he was, even at the end. If they were going to take him, he'd make damn sure they could never reach his family again. The kids don't know the full story. I told them Daddy was a hero, and that's the truth. But I didn't tell them what he gave up to become one. Ilara asks about him constantly. She's old enough to remember. She keeps a photo of him in her backpack and talks to it when she thinks I'm not looking. Maceo gets quiet when we pass construction sites or hear sirens. The twins don't really understand yet, but they know Daddy isn't coming backhand. They feel the shape of the hole he left. After the funeral, what little there was of Wunai received a letter. No return address, just my name. Inside, in his handwriting, were 3 pages of the most gut-wrenching love I've ever read. He wrote it like a man who knew the end had already come. He said he was sorry for not being able to outrun his past, for making me live through the consequence of his choices. But he said he never regretted loving me, never regretted fighting for us. He wrote, "I built something that should have never existed, a life from scraps and sacrifice. And I'd do it all again if it meant I could see you holding our babies one more time. If I could kiss you while the world slept. You were always the best thing I ever did. So I'll leave this world the same way I entered it, with your name in my heart." I read that letter 100 times. Sometimes I scream into my pillow until my throat burns. Sometimes I crawl into the side of the bed he used to sleep on and cry into his shirts, the ones I still haven't had the heart to pack away. And sometimes when the kids are asleep and the house is too quiet, he sit at the edge of our bed and whisper, "You did it. You saved us." He didn't die running. He died protecting, and he made damn sure the monsters he'd once fed would never find their way to our doorstep again. Some nights, when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, when the ghosts have room to sit at the edge of the bed and ask myself the question I've avoided for years. Was it my fault too? If I had begged harder? If I had told him no when those first shady jobs came knocking? If I had pulled us out before the money became a reason to stay? Would he still be alive? I think about the version of our lives where we stayed poor, where the heater still broke in winter and I had hand-me-down shoes, and I never finished nursing school. Would I trade our comfort, our home, our peace, if it meant hearing his voice again, feeling his arms around me one last time? Yes, God, yes. I loved the life we built, but I loved him more. And now that he's gone, all that remains is the shell of the empire we made, and the children who carry his eyes. I carry him with me in every packed lunch, every bedtime story, every scraped knee and first day of school. I carry him in the silence after the chaos, in the shadows he died to protect us from, and I live. I live because he gave up his life to let us have one. But I still wonder, sometimes, would you have stood by him knowing the risks? Would you have walked away to protect your children from a storm that hadn't arrived yet? Or would you have, like me, believed so fiercely in the man you loved that you followed him into fire? Be honest.